institution, there are two Indias which again raise questions whether we are talking about class or caste or dominion. Really speaking, elitism is about you being relative to somebody. So I might be, or let's say, I would say I am much more elite than a lot of underprivileged people in rural India who struggle to get to school, to hospitals, to... I studied in a government school, which is Kendriya Vidyalaya, central school. So I think people who studied in public schools or the elite schools are more elite. So one can keep arguing this point. But really the central question is the system in these institutions promoting exclusivity? Is it promoting inclusion? Is it creating distance, or is it bringing people closer? And that really is the question that we should be looking at. So what we can do is we start with each of us, each of you sort of giving a perspective on what you think is elitism and how you view this. And in that, probably explain that what you're actually doing is not elitist, or probably is inclusive or progressive, whatever is the epithet of the day or of this hour. And then we can look at what can be done in these institutions to make it more progressive, more inclusive. We have an interesting combination in Thiagaraj. He's a public representative, he's an MLA, so he will have a certain take on it. You both as directors of institutions also have a certain template that you're looking at to bring in more people from the less than privileged areas, how to bring them, how to take knowledge to different corners of India in terms of class, caste, whatever. So I'm going to start with Himanshu, if you can sort of take off, and then we can continue.
All right, so I think first of all, I need to make the distinction very, very clear. There's a big difference between being elite and being elitist. So for example, a lot of fingers are pointed towards us, which is towards the Indian Institutes of Management, saying that IIMs are elitist. We are not an elitist institution, we are an elite institution. Now, to me, elitist means if you are an antithetical to, an antithesis to pluralism, or to inclusivity. And therefore, any institution, for that matter, in India or in any other part of the world, if at all it excludes a certain category of students based on either their caste, their creed, their religion, their economic status, their strata, etc., from coming in, then those are the elitist institutions. So far as IIMs are concerned, and I can speak about all the IIMs, particularly IIM Indore, that there is not a single student who's denied admission for the want of money. So to that extent, there is complete exclusivity, there's complete inclusivity and no exclusivity at all. And secondly, whenever we talk about pluralism, we at IIMs actually support and encourage pluralism in thoughts, words, and action, which means we actually encourage a variety of thoughts. So the kind of a method that we follow, the pedagogical tools that we follow is something called the case method, where we actually invite and encourage people to come up with multiple perspectives. We do not force a particular perspective on them, saying that, look, this is the ideal solution, this is the best solution. That is number two. And number three, even if you look at our admission process, so one is the economic disparity, which we completely do not go by. We provide scholarships to anybody who's interested here. But even when it comes to, for example, some people say that CAT is elitist. The exam itself is elitist. Now, you'll be surprised because most people think that CAT is the only criteria. The extent of percentage that CAT has in terms of value in admission, at least at IIM Indore, is only 20%. Only 20%. The remaining 80% comes from 10th marks, 12th marks, graduation marks, and something that we call the diversity factor, where we actually give marks to women, we give extra marks to people from a non-engineering background, because that's another allegation that comes to us, that all of you are male engineers out there in the IIMs. So we actually promote diversity, and not just in the admission process, but even in the classroom. And the kind of leaders that we are trying to produce are leaders who are inclusive, are leaders who are responsible, and are leaders who are going to help in nation building.
Archana, one of the things that the general impression or hearsay, if I can say, heretical thing about IIMs is that you get into an IIM, you come out to be the printing machine for the capitalists, and so the flip side, of course, is that you can't print money or print profits unless you have market share. So that in a kind of embedded inclusivity in the strategy and thinking and all. But why do you think that this image persists, that IIMs are elitists, IITs are elitists? I keep joking. I was telling Himanshu over lunch that I keep teasing my IIT classmates who went to IIT as that when are you going to actually do engineering? And so this is a constant joke between us. And the fact that most of them actually learn a subject, and management is not just about one stream. It is about management of knowledge, management of human resource. So why do you think there is this persistent image about IIMs or IITs? We don't have somebody from, but I'm sure Thiagaraj will sort of take up for some of the other institutions also, in the sense whether they are in that shape. Why is this persistence?
Yeah, my take on this is that, as Himanshu said, we are not elitist institutions, we are elite institutions. And we are promoting meritocracy. And whenever you will talk in India, there is a huge paradoxical dichotomy existing in our minds. Those who have it, those who don't have it. So always grass is greener on the other side. So admission process itself becomes a very first grade filter. Now, if you look at the R side, that IIMs are able to take care of all the parameters where there is an equal access to all the students. And this is a truth that in no IIM, no student is denied for want of money. So it has to be an elitism, which is an intellectual elitism, rather than economically driven elitism. So IIMs are a symbol, or IITs are a symbol. I have done my PhD from IIT Kanpur. So I can talk about IIT Kanpur as well, that coming from IIT Kanpur, I think all the students, the way we used to be socially sensitive and get involved in all kind of issues, they're resolving and doing the problem solving nowhere else. As a faculty member, I think same I can vouch for my colleague also, that we go to the grassroots levels and study complex issues which nobody is able to find answers to. You are talking about primary education. Now, there is no need for us to go to the primary education and start studying. And we are spending time doing it, I just got, somebody approached me that, can you talk about police service in general and how hard-pressed they are? And IIMs are the bodies who should get involved in giving us the solution, that how do we make them stress-free, and how they should be handled as a service, and how responsiveness can be improved upon. So sometime I think looking at the indicators, which in terms of the access as well as the kind of jobs people get, much of the hype has been created only looking at the indicator, which is the wages, that what are they getting in return. So it is not about ROI, focus in IIMs and all that. That is the byproduct. If you have come through some route and you have the excellence in that sense, and you come beyond that, in the upper echelon, because of that reason, I think there is a reason to call them elite institutions. And I have no problem with this label, calling these institutions, premier institutions, as elite institutions. But I have a problem with the connotation that because we are an elite institution, we are promoting two Indias. Now that is where we need to demystify the whole thing here in today's panel, I think. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Thiagaraj, as someone who is in touch with the masses in public space, in the political space, there is this perception that, and now that is coming down in some sense, we have some really well-educated, achievers in politics. I can state off Sachin Pilot is from a management institute. In Delhi, Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal is from IIT Kharagpur. Jairam Ramesh, IIT Kanpur, IIT Mumbai, Nandan Nilekani, IIT Mumbai, who set up Aadhaar. R.S. Sharma, who is the TRAI chief, is an IIT Kanpur alumni. But yet there is this thing. Is the issue that when they come out of the alum, when they come out of these institutions, are sort of, they mistake that they come from an elite institution, which is meritocratic, as Archana rightly pointed out, and merit often is seen as a have, not elite concept, and that is a paradox. But are they sort of coming out and presenting themselves in a manner that sort of perpetuates this myth of them creating two Indias?
It's hard for me to speak for a whole cohort of fellow alums, but just going back to the points maybe they raised as part of your answer. Every system, every society, I've had the luxury of living in 3-4 different countries and working in 50 or 60. So there will be elite institutions in every society, in every system. I think the issue really here is maybe 2 or 3 perspectives. One, what you said. Do the graduates of these elite institutions put back into society, are they a value add to the country in a broader sense than their personal development? Question one. On the input side, should the government or the state's resources be directed to fund these kinds of elite institutions, which by nature are minuscule in their intake relative to overall education goals? Or should that be better left to private people or other things like that? And maybe a very difficult and deep-rooted question, is a meritocracy really kind of achievable, or do we kid ourselves that a kind of testocracy is a meritocracy? Now, I'm a hugely conflicted participant. I'm a graduate of NIT, I'm a graduate of MIT, I'm an ex-investment banker. 2 years in a row, I recruited over 80 graduates of the IITs and IIMs for my operation at Lehman Brothers. So I have benefited greatly from the system. Now you say, was my being at NIT or MIT a sign of social mobility and equal access or not? I'm not a good case. My grandfather was at Oxford 100 years ago. We were wealthy landlords. So the system has not provided any kind of special uplift by giving me. If, on the other hand, you do some socio-economic analysis and find that 60% of the IIM graduates have come from working class backgrounds or first-time graduates or something like that, then you have a much stronger case that it's really a meritocracy, and it's not just the system perpetuating the upper kind of echelons of the economic and social structure feeding back into themselves. So it's a very complicated system because, as you know, the term meritocracy itself was coined in a kind of derogatory, pejorative way by Michael Young to suggest that a system that purported to be driven only by merit and equal access and all that could easily deteriorate to as bad as the aristocracy. In fact, in an aristocracy, sooner or later, the brain power will go down over generations and the wealth will be lost. But in a true meritocracy, if it was pure, you would perpetuate an upper class. And so, the extent to which these institutions are actually promoting social mobility and the government either funding or directing this kind of mobility is really the question, I think, as a policy question for a public servant like me.
Okay, so there are two very interesting points that you made. One is the larger impact of these institutions, considering that if not all, some part of their budgets are sort of fixed by governments, there is public funding involved. The other second part of the story is what do these students come out and sort of give back to society. And it would be interesting to get some view from you, Himanshu and Archana, as to what do you think may be another alternate way of I dare say that the burden on the taxpayer may not be huge on IIMs, but it could be a case study for IIMs to think of how they can bring down the burden on the taxpayer in funding these institutions. Maybe the alums can provide for. And I think that some amount of this has happened in alum associations of IITs and IIMs.
It's already on, yeah.
Yeah, but a larger case would be to tell people the stories of what percentage of first-time graduates, postgraduates, people from deprived backgrounds have come into IIMs, and what kind of contribution IIMs are making to society at large in terms of improving. Like Archana mentioned this thing about public schools and about police reforms. So, I mean, are IIMs taking up the real problems of society and addressing them? So we could sort of diffuse some of this or clarify this issue of confusion between elitism, meritocracy. I mean, merit itself is a very loaded term, so one has to be careful while using it.
So in fact, I'll take a step back. So even before I talk about what are the institutions doing in terms of what we faculty do or my colleagues do, let me allay one of the things, which is IIMs are not dependent on government and the taxpayers' money forever. We are supported only for a certain time period, and after that, we are not. So for example, neither of the two IIMs are currently being supported by the government. In fact, we do a lot of stuff which is pro bono in nature. Just to give you an example as to how inclusive, at least I can speak for IIM Indore, we have a program, a particular course called the Rural Engagement Program, where all 600 plus of our students, they go and live across 106 villages of Madhya Pradesh for a period of 1 week. They pick up the problems of the villagers, and then they solve those problems. And then they stay with those problems, which means even after they graduate, they make sure that they stay with those problems and find out if the solutions have been implemented by the state government or not. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Apart from that, all 600 of our students necessarily have to do something that we call social internship, where they actually pick up live projects for a period of 2 months and then try and address social problems. So this is what students do even before they graduate. Now, coming to the students who we take in, and I completely agree with, I also happen to be from an NIT and then subsequently worked with Tata Steel for a few years before deciding to shift to academics. So went back to school at IIM Ahmedabad. And in both the places, I can assure you that most of us, and if I have to throw out a number, I would say more than 80% of us came from extremely humble backgrounds. And therefore, there was this mobility, and there was also this thing about doing something back. So for example, what we have done at IIM Indore is that we have adopted a village. And of course, there are some other angles to that as well. That was the village, my ancestral village, where my father was born. And we are creating it into a model village. And once we have created that model, we are going to replicate that across the district. And then subsequently, if the government of India decides, we are going to replicate that model across the country. And by the way, for all of this is pro bono. So my faculty colleagues are giving time to all of these without charging a single penny. Not just that, one of the things, and mea culpa, I agree, we can be blamed for that IIMs historically have not done enough for the region that they have operated in. And therefore, when I took charge a year back of IIM Indore, I said, we are going to solve at least one problem of the region. And on the 100th day of my taking charge, we gave the solution to the traffic problem of Indore. And so much so that now we are being approached by other cities to suggest similar solutions.
Excellent.
So we are doing all of that.
Yeah. Excellent.
And just coming to the students, by the way, a lot of my students are now actually doing their internship with political parties. Some of my students have actually gone back into farming. And what they're trying to do is aggregate farmers and then try to give them solutions so as to improve yield and productivity. And I'm very proud of my students.
Big round of applause. That's really inclusive, progressive thinking. Archana, you might have...
Yeah, as Himanshu said, I think all of it is happening in IIM Lucknow also. We have students who have not taken placements, and they chose to go to cities where education is not there, so they want to promote those schools, and they have not taken the jobs, right? We have a series of, I can name number of social initiatives where students have come forward and they have denied these so-called very great wages and premium wages in their mind, and which make them elitist. Now, as IIM Lucknow, we also, as all IIMs are doing, I think we also have adopted 5 villages where this model village and all those things have to be experimented, because unless we come forward, I think there is a symbiotic relationship between all classes, right? We cannot exclude someone that in the neighborhood if somebody is not well, somebody doesn't have electricity, somebody is grappling with the literacy problems, or healthcare is not being administered, then IIMs cannot be completely oblivious to this. So we have a responsibility towards society, and that's why in our social projects, we engage students into it, and we do sufficiently all the students. Now, something very, very exclusive which IIM Lucknow has started, which is program completely on business sustainability. And I think this is the biggest problem today we are grappling with. Enough profit we have spoken about, but profit for whom? Now, today we need to talk about that profit actually was at loss. So because you did it at the cost of something, and therefore sensitization is needed in the society, and students need to be the torch bearer for that, and they are acting as a catalyst. So we have started a full-fledged program on business sustainability, and we do some one section, because still industry is not ready, so we do not want too many people talking about it, but whosoever goes with that mindset is not geared towards a mindset to find a job. So this is where you need to be a catalyst, you need to be a change driver, you need to understand that where are the real problems, because sometimes we talk about the problems on one hand and we continue to do something very different at home, and therefore we want charity should begin at home, and that's why the whole program. Now, I can also talk about IIM Lucknow as the second IIM in the country after IIM Ahmedabad, who started the program in agri-business, because we found there is a substantial need in agri-business to be promoted, because still we are listening that lots of problems in the rural India because of this. Now, bottom of the pyramid, if we want to do something, we also have to touch upon these areas. So program-wise, we have started these programs, not only internships, not only, some short-term studies, but we want to promote this as a concept. Recently, IIM Lucknow also was instrumental in driving Uttar Pradesh government. We did the manthans with them, and series of 3 consecutive manthans in order to derive some, agenda setting at the state level. Because if the entire country is wanting to be 5 trillion, UP wants to become 1 trillion, then you have to have a focus. Now, what that focus should be, and this is where we became instrumental as IIM, and we put all these stakeholders together. I think the first time all the ministers in the same room and all the implementers who are the principal secretaries and additional secretaries, all of them were sitting together, and they were doing the brainstorming together that which are the key 5 areas at the state level which we should be talking about. Yeah, you can't take 50 things in one go, so you have to have one. So
my quick question to both of you is, are these initiatives being publicized, being put out there? Are they being recorded? Are they being YouTubed, since nobody reads anything anymore? So is that happening? Because it's not enough to do. I mean, in the new millennium, you sort of, Caesar's wife is not only to be doing things, but should be seen to be doing things.
I think you're very right, because IIM so far were not interested in popularizing all this.
No.
It was happening, but happening as a self-satisfaction that we are supposed to do all this. And what to talk about it. This is something which we wanted to always do. So we don't publicize.
This kind of, shouldn't this brand be part of your branding, part of the equity that you bring to the system? That does it happen? Do you guys talk about it enough?
Absolutely. So in fact, this was one of the fingers that was pointed at us. Those of you who follow us would know that IIM Indore got the Triple Crown accreditation, This year we got all 3 crowns. And all 3 of the accrediting agencies told us that you people are doing so much, but nobody knows out there. So why don't you talk to the people? Why don't you talk to the world that this is what you're doing? And we have started doing that. So I was so delighted that one person right here, Nakul, I think, there he is. He came up to me and said, I follow you on LinkedIn, and I'm so excited to be here just to hear you live. I keep reading your posts. So now we are doing it. We are talking about it, and you'll be happy that because we are talking about it, there's a lot of traction that we are getting globally. So globally, 4 business schools have actually come to us and said, hey, you do that rural engagement program, we would want our students to come here. They can't come for an entire term, they can't come for an entire semester, but they would love to come here for a week, be with your people in the rural areas, and then try to help solve their problems. Okay. And likewise, since I happen to be a mountaineer, I was just talking to her, we also have something called Himalayan Outbound Program, because the life of people in the mountains is very, very different. The kind of problems that they face is very, very different. And I consider myself to be a part of the Himalayas. My name is Himanshu. I keep telling people I'm a part of the Himalayas. And therefore, I said, we have to do something about them as well. And that's another thing where we are getting a lot of support from international B schools who want to come be a part of it. And while, of course, they learn their leadership skills and team building skills through the Himalayan adventure programs, they would actually want to contribute and be our partners in solving those problems.
So I'll come back to both of you with a suggestion, but I want to bring Thiagarajan into this. We often hear about industry-academy partnerships. Why is there not such a drive for, state academia partnership? Why not society academia partnership to resolve some of the issues that the society faces in terms of, very basic stuff? I mean, we can send a Mars orbiter, it can do sort of catapult and come back, but we can't simply deliver piped water to homes. So, I mean, this is an engineering issue, it's a management issue. So, why don't we hear too much about academia and society, or academia and state government partnership?
Well, my own experience is that even the industry academic partnership is less than ideal in many parts of the world, including India. The place I've seen it work the best across all the countries that I've operated or recruited in is in the US. And it is a very much capitalist system where it is in the interests of the industry to support and fund research and development in the universities. And as a function of that, the universities tailor their courses to the needs of the economy.
So it's part of the supply chain in that sense.
It's actually an integrated supply chain. In fact, in the Tamil Nadu Assembly, I've raised this issue that we in Tamil Nadu have such an outstanding gross enrollment ratio in higher education at almost 49%, like 15 points higher than the Indian average, but we don't do anything at all to connect what the colleges teach to what the industry needs. So that itself is a big deal. But if you take it to the next level and say, why isn't that a kind of government academic partnership? Historically, governments were not necessarily either payers of fees or, big sources of revenue. As you get more and more into developed country status, that happens a lot. If you look in Scandinavia, for example, there's a huge amount of funding from the government to the universities to do research for public policy and to set legislation.
Even in Singapore, I think.
I personally, back in 1987, 88, when I was a graduate student at the State University of New York, the state of New York funded industries to get competitive with the down south state that didn't have such strict labor laws through the university. So people like us went out. My first graduate assistant job was to go out to factories and help them improve efficiency with money given by the state of New York as a subsidy. So it happens, but I think it depends where you are in the economic spectrum. Now, a state like Tamil Nadu, we've certainly reached that place. We are in many ways a first world state in many statistics. And the size of our budget is, somewhere around 35 billion US dollars. Surely we should be investing in more of this. I think it's harder when you have a state that's already falling behind on basic education. And I think really, if I was to take an aside, there are two Indias. The two Indias are not about elite institutions and non-elite. It's about states where the average education level is high school or 10th grade, and many states where the average education level is elementary school dropout.
Yeah.
That's really the two Indias, that we have actually such a dichotomous kind of outcome in a country that's less than 70 years old.
Yeah.
That's really the two Indias that I would talk about.
So this has been a very interesting discussion, and I wish we could have sort of explored this further. But I have an idea for Prabhu Chawla here, that there's a lot of interesting work being done by the IIMs in terms of the public policy outreach that they do. Somebody like Thiagaraj is talking about government to academia partnership. This probably could be one of your book series that you do. So I thought that this might be an interesting thought for you. Thank you very much for your eloquence, and thank you very much for sort of taking this subject through the thing. And I'm sure some of the students here might be inspired to think of it differently.